It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello and welcome to the 43rd episode. My name is Ryan Blake, I'm the founder and director of Extreme Sports Performance. In this episode we're talking to David Dunne. David is a performance nutritionist as well as co-founder and CEO of Hexis. We focus our discussion around practical applications of nutrition for different types of sports people. I really enjoyed recording this episode with David. I hope you enjoy listening to it. Here we go. David, welcome to the Extreme Sports Performance podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Please, could you start by letting everyone know who you are and what you do?
Sure. Hello, everyone, first of all, and thanks a million for having me on the show. Delighted to be here and interested to get into a discussion. My name is David Dunne. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Hexis, a predictive nutrition ecosystem where we're helping athletes and individuals fuel smarter, whilst at the same time helping practitioners save time, improve their efficiency, and help them scale their services. My background myself is originally as a sports nutritionist or performance nutritionist in applied sport. So I spent the last 12 years working across a range of sports, spent a good bit of time with some of the Olympic disciplines, with Team GB, in particular canoe sprint and canoe slalom in the UK, a decent chunk of time with Harlequins Rugby, Queen's Park Rangers Football Club, as well as a little bit of time over in the USA as well with some organizations in the NBA and some running groups over there. But throughout the journey, I got very interested in behavior change. I got very interested in technology, and I decided to self-fund a PhD to explore those areas a little bit more, which has led to the inception of Hexis alongside my co-founders.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that great introduction. So you're going to be the perfect person for us to discuss the following topics today. So what I wanted to look at were challenges faced and practical applications that could potentially support nutrition issues or for certain cohorts of people. So the first area or the first group I'd like to discuss would be professional athletes. So they're athletes who are competing in elite sports, but they're not actually strictly professional. They're elite, they're competing at an elite level, but they're not necessarily funded or have contracts. So obviously that's quite a general group of people. But in your experience, what would you say, the biggest challenges that type of person or those type of athletes face, and what are the best practical applications to support those challenges?
Sure. I think there's two things that immediately jump to mind looking at that specific population. I think, firstly, to put it in context, there's some phenomenal athletes out there that are training, 12, 15, 20 hours plus per week for their discipline. And it can often be a shame that they're not getting the resource to help fund them throughout that process as well. So hats off to them for being able to actually go and make that happen, because there's typically a lot of sacrifices that have to happen from a lifestyle perspective and a work perspective to put themselves in that position. So I have a huge amount of respect for those individuals who are really, I don't want to say they're burning the candle at both ends, but they're really doing everything they can to make it work. From a nutrition perspective, though, specifically, I think as a byproduct of having limited resource, typically what comes with it is you generally get limited, sometimes no, access to a practitioner in that space who has the knowledge to be able to help you on your journey. So if you go into a well-funded program, you might have a practitioner or a nutritionist that you could sit down with once a week, see every day. to work on sort of periodizing your nutrition in line with the demands of your activity. But when you're doing it by yourself, there's a lot of guesswork, and it can become quite challenging. And, you push yourself so hard, you want to find ways to get the most out of every session, to amplify how your body is responding and adapting, not dampening it by choosing the wrong foods at the wrong times. So I would put that like down as sort of challenge number one, is getting access to the right information on a scalable and continuous basis. Then the reason I say that is probably feeding into what I would say is challenge number two, which is every day is different. So even if you typically know how best to approach day X, one of your bigger training days where your output is really high, if you pick up a knock or a niggle and you end up getting modified, you need to be able to dynamically respond in real time to then know how to adjust your fueling to the new demands that are being placed on your body. So I definitely think access to resource on a real-time basis are probably two of the biggest things that could be barriers to those individuals. And a lot of the time, it's not just access to education, because we know things like education and behavior are equivocal. Education is important, but it doesn't mean you're going to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you need tools that can enable you to do something that you previously weren't able to do. And I mean, that's from our perspective at Hexus, is something that we're really passionate about. Is, we built Hexus as an enablement intervention. Really, it's there to help empower people to put the, I suppose, systematized domain knowledge of a nutritionist in your pocket, so that when it knows what training you're doing, it can help you predictively personalize and periodize how you should be fueling. And then if that plan gets updated, so maybe you've connected a wearable device and things got modified because halfway through the session, something went wrong, you then need to be able to iterate in real time to be able to adjust how you should be addressing that refuel period, because now you've maybe done less than what you planned on doing. Or in an inverse situation, you maybe did more and you might require more to maximize your recovery from that workout. But they would probably be what would come to my mind as two of the biggest challenges. And hopefully what we've done at Hexus can really act as a potential solution for some people to have more confidence, clarity, and control over their own nutrition practices.
Sure. Brilliant. Thank you very much. That's a really good way to start the conversation. And I'm sure there's a lot of very useful takeaways there for people to consider. So with regards to weekend warriors or corporate athletes who tend to do a lot of performing in recreational sports, particularly over weekends, busy lives, busy work schedules, what would you say the biggest challenges are for them? And are there any practical applications to support those challenges that you've come across in your experience?
So thanks for the question. I think when we're looking at sort of weekend warriors and corporate athletes, one of the harder things to balance are the facts that at different times of the day, your body has completely different demands. When you are based in an office and you're working 9 to 5 or longer or shift work, you could be spending a lot of time, depending on the nature of your work, sitting down, performing low intensity activity, not necessarily having particularly high energy requirements. But then obviously when you get the chance to go out and perform, you want to feel at your best, because that workout is one of those events in the day that, helps clear your head. It's good for your mental health. It's good to get all those endorphins. And, what you don't want is at the end of a bad day, let's say you're going out on the bike, you don't then want to have a bad day on the bike to compound that. You want to go out to feel good, feel at your best. So I certainly think one of the challenges, I suppose, for those individuals are understanding how the demands of their day can not just vary day to day, but how they can actually vary within day. Mm-hmm. And actually how they fuel for low intensity activity when they're working and they're just trying to maintain focus and do their job and perform well, but in that, let's say, work or corporate setting, is completely different from when they then want to get out on the bike or go to the gym or whatever it might be that evening, where they actually want to get their heart rate up nice and high
Mm-hmm.
They want to be pushing out some good watts, and they want to get a proper sweat on and actually enjoy that performance and feel some of the benefits for that performance. So they may not necessarily be training for the ultimate performance goal of, say, going to the Olympics or whatever it might be, but they're still high performing individuals that are managing to balance, I suppose, their health and performance from a sporting perspective, as well as health and performance from a work perspective. So it is an interesting challenge for a lot of people. And one thing that I've seen a lot of people struggle with in this area is, because their work days are typically largely the same, in that you go to work at the same time, you typically don't run up and down the stairs 20 different times on, each day. You're going to be sat at your desk, or that area of your life will be quite consistent. And I think a byproduct of that is you see a lot of people eating the same types of foods at the same times each day in the same quantities.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to go to the gym that evening and you're going to lift for 45 minutes, or you're going to go on a bike for 2 hours, the actual energy demands of your day are quite different. The carbohydrate demands of your lunch are quite different, because one of them you might be fueling to perform in the evening to help limit fatigue and maintain that performance on the bike, versus the other could be just about, fueling for a strength training session, which would have lower carbohydrate demands and might not be as energetically demanding. So I think tools that can help to do two things: give a structure,
Mm-hmm.
and that structure can vary in line with, I suppose, their day and the strains and stresses of that day. And then I think a lot of people, seeing is believing. So sometimes actually being able to see the differences in your day can be quite beneficial. So one of the features that we worked on earlier this year at Hexus was something called Live Energy, which looks at the real-time interaction between your energy intake and your energy expenditure, as well as sort of predicts what that energy expenditure will look like into the future from your planned workout. And I think that can be a really useful tool for some individuals, just to get an understanding that, yes, I may be at the desk until 5 o'clock, but when I leave at, say, 5:30, 6, or if you're unlucky, 7 or 8, and if I am doing something, how much energy does my body need to actually be in a position to perform at that time? And if I have performed, how much does it need to recover? Or I shouldn't say perform, it could just be trained. What are the demands of that workout?
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes that visual cue can be a real eye-opener to people to say, you know what, actually, I do need to eat a bit more at lunch, even though I am sat behind a desk right now, but I'm preparing my body for later. Mm-hmm. And likewise, on the flip side of that, if you're not going to be training that evening, some days it's important to be able to say, today's not the day to go and eat out at lunch. And actually, maybe I need to just be prioritizing that higher protein, lower carbohydrate breakfast to fuel that sort of, I suppose, low intensity morning, but still provide enough protein to maintain, protect, and enhance my lean mass. So I do think one of the challenges is really understanding how to vary your meals within day to get the most out of the workouts that you do get the chance to do.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Really, really great stuff, David. Thanks for that. I'm sure that, again, there's a lot of positive takeaways for everyone listening who fall into that category. The last area I wanted to discuss would be student athletes. So everyone knows that we work very closely with student athletes who are at school and at university and participate and compete in a huge variety of team and individual sports. But, being a teenager, moving into young adulthood, having to almost go through that transition of child to adult, very challenging for lots of athletes. What would you say the biggest challenges they face are? And again, what practical applications in your experience could help support those?
Sure. It's a very difficult age. I think it's, especially the way the world is now with social media, peer pressures, social norms, it can be very difficult and challenging for individuals to be comfortable and confident in themselves and in their eyes, let's say, really, really fit in. And I think one of the unfortunate realities is it's not an easy time for them either, because you've got a lot of people that are willing to hide behind computer screens and keyboards and chuck abuse without ever considering the context or the person on the other side as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when we're looking at student athletes in particular, I think, to pull out of that, one of the biggest challenges is definitely knowing where to get sound information from, knowing who to trust. Because if you go on TikTok, if you go on Instagram, there's going to be all these influencers who are going to be selling you all these things who may not have a sound underpinning of evidence-based practice and actually know what's, let's say, best for you. And I think a really good example of this is some of the work a girl called Pixie Turner, who she was doing some research over at UCL, and she actually looked at something called orthorexia, which is, let's say, this.
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
An obsessive behavior with healthy eating, really. And I think that was I think her work was really interesting to see that it's not just people eating, let's say, over fueling and eating the wrong things. Like I think in the UK, we, in particular with student athletes, you don't see like an obesity problem. I actually think you see the inverse. Mm-hmm. You see a lot of people trying to achieve a certain body composition to be perceived as a certain way, which in many unfortunate scenarios can lead to underfueling. And then in more extreme scenarios can lead to things like REDS, relative energy deficiency in sport, where we start to see, poor concentration, poor recovery, lost menstrual cycles, and a range of other physiological problems. So I think for any student athletes that are listening, I think the first thing that is important to highlight is there is so much misinformation out there. Yes, you can scroll through these social media feeds, but don't use them as gospel. They're there, and algorithms are created to capture our attention, to make us feel certain ways, to make us think certain things. So have an appreciation that those platforms are designed to do it. But if you have your own goals for your own sport at university and your own performances that you want to achieve, you need to be looking at trusted people and trusted resources to go and gather your information from. So, what practitioners are they working with, whether it's yourself, other individuals, that they can go and reliably understand that this is the right thing for me. And I think when it comes to nutrition, like I said, because underfueling is such a big issue, sometimes making people understand that their body actually does require more fuel just to maintain normal physiological processes and support basic training demands is one of the biggest things.
Sure.
Because, like I said, people want to look a certain way. They want to be perceived a certain way. And it is really tough. So again, if I'm, we actually did a study back in 2020 where we had just over 900 and I think it was 73 athletes that were part of it. We had just over 540 females as part of that study. We made a really conscious effort to try go 50-50 and capture good data across both genders. And it was really interesting to see the impact of a carbohydrate periodization framework on those individuals' dietary intake behaviors. And even some of the qualitative stuff we ended up finding was quite interesting, was that for males, a lot of the time, periodization, and this is a huge generalization, I want to say at the top of this. This isn't for everyone, but if I'm painting the genders with sort of one brush, I'll give it at a high level. For males, those periodization frameworks, so for example, carb coding like we have in Hexus, became a really useful tool to let them know when they needed to dial down, pull back. Look, I need to eat less here because I'm less active. So I'm going to put the reins on. But for females, it was actually the complete opposite. It was almost like permission for when it's okay to fuel up and eat more and actually give my body more. And I found that really interesting, how there was those sort of two different mental models going on from the start. Like I said, huge generalization, not necessarily the case for absolutely everyone. And I think we found some really interesting findings that made sense, although we didn't have them down as primary outcome measures. Like, we were interested in the periodization behaviors of athletes, but we did have a few female athletes phone us up towards the end of the trial to say they'd regained their menstrual cycle, having not had their menstrual cycle in anything from 3 months to 2 years previously. And when you think about it, it makes complete sense. You've now just started to fuel your body better and start to meet your energy demands, to make sure that you're having enough actual fuel to recover from, as well as perform during your exercise, and then how that's periodized throughout the day. So when we're speaking about the answer, I suppose, to question 2, looking at that real-time interaction between intake and expenditure, because the endocrine system is so sensitive to that, actually getting that right structure throughout the day provides a really nice framework to be able to give you let's say, a backbone plan that you can adhere to, and just making it simpler and easier to access. So I think in adolescent athletes, getting that understanding of what their actual energy requirements are, because a lot of them can be very high. They're pretty active. They're pretty active even when they're not necessarily training. You're walking to your friends. Not everyone at university has a car, so you might have to walk to the shops and carry your food back, and all these other areas that can start to contribute to, let's say, non-exercise activity. But they're still taking from you, and you're going to need to put that fuel back in. But I think really just helping them realize how much fuel they need to eat to meet their energy demands and support their performance can definitely be one of the biggest challenges. And feeling comfortable doing it, sort of overcoming some of the unfortunate peer pressure that social media brings.
Fantastic. What a brilliant answer. Thank you so much for all that advice. I'm sure there's people listening which have definitely got some very valuable takeaways from that. David, I've got 3 quick fire questions for you just to finish off our chat, and then I'll let you go. The first one is, and these are all based around just takeaway pieces of advice for people who've got, first of all, challenges with injury. Yep. What would you say your best takeaway piece of advice would be for that?
I think my biggest takeaway advice for that is eat to recover, not to maintain body composition. Okay. We see a lot of people, when they get injured, their first reaction is to eat less because they're doing less. But sometimes, depending on the nature of the injury, it can actually take energy to help it recover. So our base energy requirements could be anything from 15 to 50% higher, depending on the nature of the injury. If I go in and have an operation on my knee tomorrow, I'm going to need more energy to actually help repair, recover, remodel all of that tissue. And actually, even though I'm not training, I might not need to pull back that less. So I would say, make sure you're eating to recover, not to maintain body composition.
Brilliant. The second quick fire question would be, what's your best takeaway piece of advice for athletes of any description who travel a lot?
Ooh, good question. And there's a lot of them. I'll give a short answer, which would be always pack enough food and fluid for the plane and whatever, if it is a bus, a train, etc., on the other side. The amount of athletes that I see getting on a plane and they have everything they need, and then they land in the new destination, and then it's another hour or 2 hours to the hotel, and then they're kind of, I don't have any water, I don't have any food. Everyone forgets that last bit on the other side. So I'd say pack enough for the flight and the transfer on the other side.
Fantastic. Brilliant. And then last question is, what's generally, for those who are very new or just opening the door to sports nutrition, who've only just discovered this world and they want to dive a little bit deeper into it, what would you say your best takeaway piece of advice would be for them?
Ooh, good question. It's a big topic. There's a lot of information out there. I would say the best bit of advice I could say would be, and if people could only do one thing at the very start of wanting to learn more, I would say it's identify who you can trust, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. But at the very start of wanting to explore sports nutrition, if you're listening to podcasts where you've got the likes of Professor Louise Burke, etc. on them, you're in a good place. You know, if it's your favorite Instagram influencer, you're probably not in such a good place. So identify the key names of who you can trust and then enjoy exploring.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time today and for coming on the show. And it's great to chat. And we wish you you and Hexis all the very best moving forwards.
Brilliant. Thanks a million. I really appreciate it, Ryan. And looking forward to catching up again soon.
Thanks for listening to the 43rd episode. We hope you enjoyed the show. It would really help us out if you could please leave a rating and or review on whatever platform you're listening on. Is there someone you know who would benefit from hearing what you've just heard? Then share the love by sending them a link. Be sure to check out our website extremesportsperformance.com that has details about how to stay updated to receive our bi-weekly blog and monthly update emails, our free education resources, our training programs and nutrition plans, our coaching packages, our professional performance services, our online store, and how to get in touch if you have any questions. Join our growing community on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok and X. Links to these can be found at the bottom of all of our website pages and via any search engine. Until next time, release those limits and go well.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, you know, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.